Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibhiriritam Kalmashapaham Sravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvi Grananti Bhurida Jana. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna with the devotees at Dakshineshwar. So one of the devotee asks, in continuation to Sri Ramakrishna's conversation, that in the last class we were studying that besides one cannot think of God unless one lives in solitude. The goldsmith melts gold to make ornaments, but how can he do his work well if he is disturbed again and again? Suppose you are separating rice from bits of husk. You must do it all by yourself. Every now and then you have to take the rice in your hand to see how clean it is. But how can you do your work well if you are called away again and again? So we were studying that in spiritual life one have to be very, very meticulous as per his constant vigilance of the mind is concerned. And that's only possible when he is in solitude, when he is not interacting with the world. Then only he can find the working of his own mind. And then he finds out that the real enemy is not out there, it is in the mind itself. That what tremendous vagaries of thoughts it has constantly. It is jumping from thought to thought, and all sorts of worldly entanglements is what is reflected in those thoughts. And now, unless we are in solitude and we are seeing the condition of our mind, how come the question of controlling the mind can we think of? The question of controlling of the mind doesn't come unless first we are aware of the working of the mind. And that's why we find that Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of the solitude. And we find that it's not that easy. So that's why a devotee feels somehow a bit discouraged when Sri Ramakrishna is speaking about how difficult it is to control the mind. And then he's saying, a devotee is asking, what then is the way, sir? Master, there is a way. One succeeds if one develops a strong spirit of renunciation. Give up at once with determination what you know to be unreal. Once, when I was seriously ill, I was taken to the physician Ganga Prasad Sen. He said to me, I shall give you a medicine, but you mustn't drink any water. You may take pomegranate juice. Everyone wondered how I could live without water, but I was determined not to drink it. I said to myself, I am a Paramahamsa, not a goose. I shall drink only milk. So here we will find that even in the Bhagavad Gita, the entire spiritual journey actually has been spoken of having two components. What are the two components? Abhyasa and Vairagya. Vairagya means renunciation, Abhyasa means practice. This Vairagya, renunciation of what? All the desires of which I am aware of. As in the Yoga Sutra, they speak of these two types of vasana. desires. One is Vyakta Vasana and another is Avyakta Vasana. Vyakta Vasana means the manifested desires. Avyakta Vasana, unmanifested desires. It's not that the desires which are manifested in our mind is the be-all and be-all of the so-called the entire mind. It doesn't define the gamut of the entire mind. We are so much perplexed with all those desires which are manifested, but that is just a small part. There are so many desires which are unmanifested. So, what's the spiritual practice? First, the desires which are vyakta, which are manifested, which I can deal with, there I have to use my willpower to a certain extent to get rid of them. But what about the unmanifested desires? That's what they say, that in spiritual journey, if I have to get rid of the desires one by one, it is almost impossible. Because there are so many desires. There are so many manifested desires. Even if I can get rid of them one by one, it is impossible. But even if I do, and then again we will find that in some new circumstances, all those avyakta vasana, they, getting the favorable circumstances, they now pop up. I was not aware of them. Now, getting some favorable circumstances, they pop up. Now again I have to deal with them. How is it possible to get rid of them one by one? It is almost impossible. So what's the spiritual practice we have to inculcate in our life? First comes this vairagya, that whatever desires are manifested, that to certain extent with my willpower, with the determination, that is Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of, that with a strong spirit of renunciation, give up at once with determination what you know to be unreal. So then Sri Ramakrishna is giving his example of his own life, that there was a need for him to be without water for some time, and he took a strong resolution that yes, I won't drink water. So what he is speaking of here, that take care of the vyakta vasanas with the help of that vairagya. We can develop that tremendous willpower to get rid of the manifested desires. But as we were saying, that doesn't speak of all the sanskaras, all the latent impressions which is there in my mind. There are so many others. So how to get rid of them? Now, there is a need to get rid of the vyakta vasana at the beginning so that I can calm down my mind. Because the desires which are manifested, they are constantly creating turbulence in my mind. Unless through certain practice I try to subdue them, I can never think of calming down the mind. And why the calming down of the mind is required? For the next practice, the abhyasa. That I have to sit down and meditate, contemplate on what? That I am the Atman. This Aham Brahmasmi, I am the self. A jnani may meditate on his own self. A bhakta meditates on Ishvara, on the Lord. But both are having the same effect. What the same effect? So when you are meditating either on the self or on God, the idea is that I am constantly hammering my ego. See, what's the idea of ego? That this I am this limited body-mind complex. It was born at certain point of time. It is going to die at certain point of time. It is going through constant transformation as long as it lives. With that I is hooked. With that I is associated. Now when I am saying I am the self, what's the idea? That I am infinite. Trikal avadhita satya. I was, I am, I will be through eternity, and that also without any transformation, I am as I am. So this is the idea which is constantly negating the idea of this limited individuality, the ego. And the one who is a devotee, he is also doing the same thing. God is an infinite reality, that through all the phases of time he was. I as this Atman, the self, I am an infinite reality. I was, I am, I will be. And I am associated with that divine. The Atma is related to the Paramatma through that eternal companionship. This life is just a passing phase. I, as a devotee, am eternally associated with the divine. In all the religions, in any of the religions, this basic idea is there. The self is associated with the divine through eternity. This phase is just a passing phase. So when I am, as a devotee meditating, I am doing the same thing. I am trying to negate the ego. As a jnani, I am trying to negate the ego. So how this abhyasa now helps? First, with the help of vairagya, I have to a certain extent calmed down my mind by getting rid of the manifested desires. But there are so many other desires. They are all linked to the ego. This is a very interesting thing. All our samskaras and desires are hooked to the ego, as we say again and again, that our personality is just like a wheel whose hub is the ego, and all our samskaras, the lateral impressions and the desires, are like the spikes. That when I get rid of the vyakta vasana, I got rid of few of the spikes. But the wheel is still intact because the hub is there and the other spikes are there to keep the wheel intact. Now to get rid of all the spikes one by one is impossible. There are infinite such spikes. So how to get rid of all the desires? If I can get rid of the hub, the ego, with which all the so-called spikes, the desires, the samskaras are all connected. Now this type of abhyasa, meditation, when you have calmed down the mind, with a calm mind, now you are constantly hammering the ego through your contemplation, be it you are a jnani or be you are a bhakta. The meditation has the same effect. It is hammering on the ego. And when I succeed in hammering out the ego, all the spikes, vyakta or avyakta, they all collapse, enabling me to get rid of this idea of this limited individuality. This limited individuality is nothing but the ego connected with so many desires. When the ego falls off, all the desires collapses in a one go, and rendering you that ultimate spiritual freedom. So here first Sri Ramakrishna speaks, what's the way, the devotee asks, Sri Ramakrishna first speaks of that vairagya, that one succeeds if one develops a strong spirit of renunciation. Give up at once with determination what you know to be unreal. So that's the vairagya. And then now, next, what he will be saying, that you have to spend a few days in solitude. If you but touch the granny, you are safe. Now this is the para vairagya, which comes when all the desires falls off all at once with the dissolution of the ego. That leads to the supreme renunciation. So when it happens, when you have touched the granny, the ego has fallen off and enabling you to be one with the self or one with Ishvara, or to be in association with the Ishvara. So here what happens, you have touched the granny, you're safe. Turn yourself into gold and then leave wherever you please. Once that is done, now all the desires have collapsed because of the dissolution of the ego. Now you are a free person. Nothing can in any way disturb you, torment you. So turn yourself into the goal. You have transformed through that abhyasa now. So now there is no need for willful resolution to get rid of the desires. They have all fallen off. Because of that, you have touched the granny. You have went to that realization. With the dissolution of the ego, you have went to the realization, and now you have been transformed. And that's why they are saying, after realizing God and divine love in solitude, one may live in the world as well. So after that state, now you can live in the world. Because your renunciation has become spontaneous. You have reached the state of that supreme renunciation, para vairagya. There is no question of getting tarnished by the world anymore, because now the renunciation has become spontaneous. That is why I ask the youngsters, he is actually speaking to Rakhal's father, that what he is saying, that is why I ask the youngsters to stay with me, for they will develop love of God by staying here a few days. After that, they can very well lead the life of a householder. So here, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating that once they have touched the this the touchstone, this Parash money. Once they have touched it, they have been transformed into gold. Their life has been transformed. And after that, there is no fear. Whether they are a sannyasi or they are a householder, wherever they may live, they have attained that spontaneous renunciation, that para vairagya, and now there is no question of getting tarnished by the world. So these are the two things which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of. How nicely the same idea we find in the Yoga Sutra. That's first you have to attain this vairagya through willful determination, willful resolution, and then through that abhyasa, you reach the state of para vairagya, where the ego has been dissolved, all the desires has collapsed, and now you are free and your renunciation has become spontaneous. Nothing can bind you. And then there is no question of any fear. So the problem of the good and evil. A devotee now asks this question. If God is responsible for everything, then why should people speak of good and evil, virtue and vice? One commits sin also by the will of God. Isn't that so? So that's the question. That if everything is happening by the will of God, then all the evil tendencies that a person have in his mind, that also must be the will of God. Everything is happening by the will of God. So where is the question of committing sin? Everything is happening by the will of God. So that's the question which a devotee asks. Another devotee. How can we understand the will of God? So that it is the will of God, how can we understand? Everything is happening by the will of God. Master, there is no doubt that virtue and vice exist in the world, but God Himself is unattached to them. There may be good and bad smells in the air, but the air is not attached to them. So first Sri Ramakrishna is negating the idea that our evil acts tarnish the Lord. Whether everything is happening by God's will, he will come to that later. First, here the question was that when I am committing sin, isn't it actually is by the will of God? So we can say God is actually committing sin. So first, he is negating this idea that our evil in no way can tarnish the Lord. So what he is saying? That there is no doubt that virtue and vice exist in the world, but God Himself is unattached to them. There may be good and bad smells in the air, but the air is not attached to them. So this to explain this idea, we may even take the example of Sri Ramakrishna in some other context. He says the sun in the sky, it gives light. With that light, a devotee is reading the scripture, and a counterfeiter, the one who counterfeits coins, he is counterfeiting the coins. The same sunlight with which one is counterfeiting the coins and other is reading the scripture. Does the sunlight in any way, that's what Sri Ramakrishna is asking, does the sunlight in any way get affected by either of them? Does it become more holy because of the holy act of that devotee, or does it become polluted because of this evil act of the one who is counterfeiting the coins? It doesn't affect. The sun is something which gives light unconditionally to all. What we are doing with that in no way affects the sun. That's the example Sri Ramakrishna gives in some other context. Here also what he is saying, that there are good and bad smells in the air, but the air is not attached to them. So what is the idea? That I actually by air in Sri Ramakrishna speaking of the space. In the space where the air is traveling, that air may be associated with the good smell or bad smells, but does it in any way affect the space? No. The space in which the air is traveling, that space is in no way attached to the good smell or the bad smell. Nothing can tarnish the space. So that's the idea which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking here. So the Lord is not affected by our acts. Now everything happens by our will. Then the evil act is happening by His God's will. Isn't it so? That was another question. So now let's see what Sri Ramakrishna has to say. The very nature of God's creation is that good and evil, righteousness and unrighteousness will always exist in the world. Among the trees in the garden, one finds mango and jackfruit, and hawk plum too. Haven't you noticed that even wicked men are needed? Suppose there are rough tenants on an estate. Then the landlord must send a ruffian to control them. So on the broader perspective, we see that good and evil has a meaningful place in God's creation. That as Sri Ramakrishna is saying that sometimes even in the gospel in some other context, Sri Ramakrishna gives another example. That what's that example? Very nice example he's giving. That once that Sita asked Rama that why should there be such polarity in your kingdom, in existence, this disparity in your existence. Some are rich, some are poor. Why not all become rich? And Rama tried to explain Sita that for the creation this duality is required, this disparity is required. But Sita Ma, out of kindness, that motherly heart, told, but why should some suffer because of this poverty? Why not all be rich? And Rama smiled and told, okay, as you wish. And then what happens? He distributes the wealth to all. That whatever wealth he has in his this treasury, he distributes. And after a few days, it so happens that there's a leak in the roof of the palace. And in the monsoon, the water was dripping. And now there was a need to call for this tradesperson, the tradesperson to come and to repair it. But none were to be found. And at last, after the search, when it was not found, they found that with all the wealth, they have now no motivation for work. Even when they have been called for the work, they are not at all interested to come and do the work because of the wealth they have already got. And now Mother Sita realized that Rama's statement, that in this kingdom everything is required. That unless there is a need, we don't have the motivation for the work. So all these negativities are in certain extent required to balance the existence. Then the existence, both the polarities has to be there. And even from the spiritual point of view, that negativities has to be there if at all we have to evolve spiritually. That why? That so many times have related that story of the prodigal child in the Bible. It's a very nice story. That there is a need for all the so-called evils of life. There is a need. Otherwise, we will never turn towards God. There is in Sankhya philosophy that idea is there. That the idea is that there is a mountain top where the weather condition allows for the mangoes to grow there, not in the plain. The plain has too extreme weather. If it's in the mountain top where the weather is much moderate, there the mango trees grow. So now in Sankhya philosophy, that there is a very nice allegory. They say, then why should a man climb a mountain to get the mangoes if it's available in the plain? So what's the idea? That why should we after all aspire for spirituality with all the endeavor if this world was perfect? We would have been quite satisfied with the world. But the plan of the divine is such that we at last have to relate to him through love. As we say, the idea is that the God is one, he became many. Why he became many? To experience the joy of union. That he is Ladini Shakti, that he has that inherent capacity of bliss. That is its nature. And to realize that bliss, to enjoy that bliss, he wants to experience it through love, through union. We will find that even in our day-to-day life, the highest expression of the joy comes from the union. When the two souls come together in love, they experience the joy. So God also wanted to experience the joy inherent in him. And so he was one, he became many. And now, this meant that he wanted this to enjoy the union with this many. But at the same time, we find that he has not created us in such a way that instead of feeling attraction towards him, we run towards the world. Why? Because, again, that though he has created many, at the same time, if he would have made us in such a way that we are always conditioned to love him, then that love couldn't be experienced. Because in love, we need a choice. When I love someone, the other person should have the choice either to reciprocate it or may not. If he is programmed to reciprocate, that when I show love, he is bound to love me, then it will give me a feeling that it is just like some artificial intelligence. It is just an artificial intelligence programmed to just, the shower unconditional love to me. So I can never feel love towards that, because it is something like a machine. So that's why God, to experience the union, that love, that joy through that love, he gave us the choice. And then where the evil comes, because of that choice the evil comes. That we somehow gets ensnared by the phenomenal existence and run towards it. But at the same time, God has made that phenomenal existence imperfect. It's not perfect. We can never get happiness out of it. And then at last, when we get exhausted, we get totally expended, and then finding no other way, we turn around. And God is waiting for that when we turn around, in expectation that God will come and rescue me. He comes running. The moment I feel the need of God, he comes running to get united with us. So that's how the story of the prodigal child has been described. That a rich man had two sons. That some are like Nitya Siddhas. The elder son is the Nitya Siddha. He is always obedient to his father. He is always loving his father. But this younger son, he is the one who wants to be free from the bonds of his father. So he goes and claims for the property, the share of his inheritance. And the father at last has to yield because he was insisting. So he gets the share of his property, leaves. But as he was an irresponsible child, in very short time he became totally, a pauper. He just wasted all the wealth. And now he didn't knew how to sustain himself. And finding no other way, the thought of the father came. But at the same time, he was full of apprehension and fear that most probably father will be angry with me. I have disobeyed him. I have separated myself from him. So he must be angry with me. But as there is no other way, most probably he won't accept me. He will be angry with me. But as there is no other way, though he is full of fear, still he starts proceeding towards his father. And the father, seeing him from a long distance, it is the father who runs, goes and embraces the son, brings him back at home, and then at night there is a huge feast to celebrate the son's homecoming. Such a nice story. So here in this story you will find everything actually has happened by the will of the Lord. He has created the universe with all its this so-called this external enchantments. It enchants us, but at the same time it doesn't have the capacity to give us even a little bit of happiness. Gandha matram sukham, gandha matram na vidyate. That's what In the Bhagavad Gita's commentary, Shankaracharya says, this world doesn't have the capacity to give us even a fragrance of happiness. And when we realize that, then we turn around. And then again, now this so-called the good, all the things which are holy, that happens when God comes and embraces us. So everything, good, evil, even from the spiritual point of view, do have a place in this divine plan, in the divine drama. So that's what we find in this God's creation, good, evil, righteousness, unrighteousness. They all are bound to exist, to coexist, because this is what is as if the plan of the universe. This world cannot be just good. Then there was no need for God. This world would have been our only destination, as it is imperfect. That's why we are in search of the divine. And this imperfection is also the will of the Lord, so that at last we turn towards Him. And then it is a God who enjoys the bliss of the communion. He is Ananda Swarup, and that is experienced again through this communion. So this is the idea which we find even in the Bhakti Shastras, in our this idea of this God's the ecstasy with the communion with the devotee has been described as the Ladini Shakti in Bhakti Shastra. This Ladini Shakti, the Shakti, the power of God for bliss, for enjoyment, and that comes through this union. So this entire thing can be visualized as the plan of the divine. So that's why this good and evil both are there, and by the will of God both are there. They coexist, and it has a particular meaning without which the existence is not possible. The conversation again turned to the life of the householder, master to the devotees. You see, by leading a householder's life, a man needlessly dissipates his mental powers. The loss he thus incurs can be made up if he takes to this monastic life. So this again you just relate it to the story of the prodigal child, that leading a householder's life is the world, the life which speaks of only worldly existence. That's the so-called, we can say, is the householder's life. When you are going away from God, thinking this life, all these worldly sensate pleasures alone is sufficient to give me the joy and happiness. So by householder's life, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating that. So that you see, by leading a householder's life, a man needlessly dissipates all his energy, his mental powers. At last he becomes a pauper. And then the loss he thus incurs can be made up if he takes to monastic life. This monastic life is nothing but turning around, going against this so-called the flow. It turns around. The entire world is going in one direction. That's the flow. It turns around. That speaks of the monastic life. And then, as we say, that the communion with the divine is possible only when we turn around. It is then God who comes running to embrace us. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you just do one. If the entire spiritual journey speaks of 16 parts of our endeavor, so he says that you just do one part. The remaining 15 part, God will do. So if you move one step, he comes running 16 steps. So this turning around speaks of the monastic life. And it is when he comes that all the loss, dissipation of energy which happened because of going away from him, that's again recompensated by turning around, by taking to that monastic life. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is just indicating to the devotees. The first birth is a gift of the Father. Then comes the second birth, when one is invested with a sacred thread. There is still another birth at the time of being initiated into monastic life. So this 3 births he is speaking. What's that? The first is the gift. First birth is the gift of the Father. As we said that the moment we are born as a human being, that itself is a great gift. There's the gift of the Father. As a human being I was born, because only in the human body we can think of spiritual evolution. As Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel says again and again, that this human is the only being who can think of God. Manushi Ishwar Chinta Korte Pare. No one else. So to get this birth as a human being, for that is a gift I got from my Father. And then comes the second birth, when one is invested with the sacred thread. Just see, as a human being, what has happened? I have accelerated my so-called biological evolution. A single cell took millions of years at last to be evolved as a human being. And in my mother's womb, the gift of the parents, my life is, what happened? That entire evolution which took millions of years by the nature, in the mother's womb it happens just in 9 months. How tremendously accelerated. So by getting the scope to be born as a human being, my entire biological evolution was accelerated at a high pace. The entire journey which has happened in the nature, I have traversed it just in 9 months. So that's a great gift. And then the second gift is when you are invested with the sacred thread. Why it is? Now, we know that in our tradition, that when a young boy is about to go to the Guru Grihava, for his education, to the house of his teacher, now his education will start. Now this education again speaks of evolution. Just see, even the human gamut of knowledge, the civilization in which we are, how many thousands of years it took for a human being to come to this. We as the food gatherers used to go to the forest and used to collect roots, herbs. We knew nothing of agriculture. From there we started. And now just think where we are. Just in thousands of years, 2,000 or 3,000 years, what we have achieved. But when you get that Brahmin boy or a very young boy goes to the school, the second birth is speaking of, the sacred thread speaks of, is going for this education. Before that, you will be invested with that sacred thread. So it speaks of the initiation into your education, process of education. So you'll find that even at present we don't have, most of us don't have that sacred thread. But we do go to the school, which speaks of our second birth. What happened? That how in 1,000 years, all the achievements of the humans to progress to this stage of civilization, all this knowledge in 10, 12 years, it took thousands of years for the humankind as a whole to achieve this. A school boy goes to the school, in 10, 12 years, he acquires that knowledge. Isn't it? Again, it speaks of another acceleration, tremendous acceleration. With the help of the language, the first, the gift of the Father was through the genes. The gift of the teacher is through the words, the language. And then, she's speaking of the third birth. And is that what is being the third birth? There is still another birth at the time of being initiated into monastic life. So when you are entering the spiritual life, the monastic life here, we can take that way. What happens? The Guru gives the mantra. That mantra is like the genes, it's like the language. That with the holding on to that mantra for the spiritual predecessors, for generations, they have hold onto this mantra, that some sage have went to the realization holding onto that mantra by contemplating on it. And when he is instructing his disciple and giving him that mantra is now already surcharged with a tremendous power. It has created a tremendous mental vibration. We all, our minds are not something segregated, isolated. It's all gets tuned to particular vibration. That Swami Vivekananda in the Karma Yoga, in the very beginning, he says that it's just like the tuning of the stringed instrumental musical instruments. In a room, if all the musical instruments are tuned in the same frequency, you will find a very interesting thing. If you just play one of the instrumental music, all other will start resonating because they are all tuned to the same frequency. This is the example which Swami Vivekananda gives in one of his lectures in Karma Yoga, to indicate that our minds also, when it gets tuned to a particular vibration, it immediately starts resonating in the same frequency of vibrations which is there always in the atmosphere. In the modern age, it is very easy to understand that when I open my TV, immediately the picture that comes here, where was it? It's there in the space, in the atmosphere. It has been transmitted. It is there. The moment I tune my TV to that particular channel, it's not that all the channels are coming. That particular channel, which has been tuned to that particular channel, only the picture of that, the sound of that comes. The same way the mantra has been tuned with the sadhana of your spiritual predecessors. So now this third birth, as a monk, when I am invested with that, all the vows of this monastic life, and that these mantras are given to me. When I'm chanting, it's not just a mechanical chanting. With proper faith, sincerity, when I'm chanting, my mind is getting tuned to the already available vibrations of all the realizations of the saints who have been my predecessor. And now my journey also gets accelerated that way. Immediately I find, just the way if I am not in a proper mood, but someone asked me to accompany him to a temple. The moment I enter, I find my mind change. There was no need for any preparation. The moment I go there, my mind changes. What has happened? That's the place which is exclusively used by all for this meditation, prayer, good thoughts alone. When I go there, that's what we use that place for. And that's how the good thoughts of so many people is saturated in that place. That has created that vibration there. The moment I go there, even without any effort, my mind gets influenced by that. If I have a little Shraddha, I get more. Because with little faith I go, and then I get tuned to that vibration, I find that it really surcharges me. I find that it's really something that suddenly my mind has been elevated. Was it my effort? No. I got the help of the collective effort of so many other sadhakas, their predecessors, their realizations. I got the effort. And then, again, this is the gift that they are coming in the form of the mantra. And that's why they are saying this is the third birth. Another birth, the time of being initiated into the monastic life. So first birth is the gift of the father. Second, when you are invested with the sacred thread. Third is when you are initiated into the monastic life. The two obstacles to the spiritual life are woman and gold. Man doesn't know what it is that causes his downfall. Once while going to the fort, I couldn't see at all that I was driving down a sloping road. But when the carriage went inside the fort, I realized how far down I had come. The man possessed by a ghost does not realize it. He says, "Why? I am all right." So this speaks again of the spiritual sensitivity, the need for tremendous vigilance in spiritual life. As we have in some other context have mentioned, that purity is not innocence. A small child is innocent, but as it reaches puberty, so many things which was dormant in his mind or her mind, that starts manifesting, and suddenly we are shocked. Oh, from where he got these traits? So that's innocence. Innocence doesn't speak of purity. Purity is something which speaks of maturity through the experiences of life. I went through certain experiences, and the consequences have created a deep imprint in my mind, and now I don't repeat it. At the very exposure of it, I get aware. Previously I was not aware. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna, how nicely is to say that in our case, that sensitivity is not there at all. We are like a camel which feed on thorny bush. It bleeds, and still it continues to feed on the thorny bushes. So this speaks of the lack of sensitivity. In spiritual life, what is needed is a tremendous sensitivity. Otherwise, when that a little carelessness, because of the little carelessness, we may think I have progressed a lot, a little carelessness may result in a little fall. No. As Shankaracharya gives a very nice example, that suppose you are in Vivek Churamani, this example is there. Suppose you're climbing the stairs with a ball in your hand, Golaka, and you have almost reached the terrace. Just 1 or 2 steps left. And then you get a bit careless and you trip and the ball falls from your hand. Will the ball stay in the stair up to where you have reached? No. It will simply roll down from where you have started. It will simply roll down. So they say that's the thing, that a little laxity, carelessness will again take you to the square zero. So we may think that I have attained something, and that may give some sense of complacency. But in spiritual life, there is no place for this complacency. You have to be extremely vigilant, and that vigilance should become your habit. That's that how much that sensitivity is like. In our scriptures, they give a very nice example. What the sensitivity is like, that if a sand particle falls on your skill, you are sometimes not aware of it. But the same sand particle, if it falls on your eyeball, what happens? Tremendous irritation you feel. A spiritually sensitive person is just like the sensitivity of that eyeball. All the things which we take as natural, obvious, it doesn't harm. It's after all casual. These are all so-called these innocent pleasures of life. A so-called spiritually evolved person is very, very vigilant about it, because he knows that this path to this downfall is so gradual, sometimes even we don't notice. So once we have educated ourselves through our spiritual maturity, that vigilance comes. That's why in English they say the price of purity is vigilance. So that's to create this deep impression in our minds. Sri Ramakrishna, that's why he's relating to that he is speaking of that vairagya, and that vairagya is not easy. We have to be very, very vigilant to get established in that vairagya, and for that Sri Ramakrishna is giving that example, that once he himself went to this Fort William in Calcutta. So if you go to the Fort William, even now you will find it's a very gradual slope from the road. When you are going towards it, it's a gradual slope. The moment you reach and then turn around, you find that the road is quite high. The slope was so gradual, you never felt you were coming down. But when you reach the fort, you find that you have came down a lot. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that unless and until we are vigilant in our spiritual life, the so-called innocent pleasures of life gradually creeps in, gradually. It's little by little, at last, disorienting us, throwing us out from our integrity. So that's why when we are practicing vairagya, this vigilance is the very important thing. The price of purity is vigilance. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna is indicating that the spiritual life, as you are saying, that how is it possible? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Is it easy? No, it's very difficult. But difficult doesn't mean impossible. It's difficult, it's challenging, but it is possible. Just like climbing the Mount Everest. It is very difficult, but not impossible. So generally we equate difficulty with impossible. So here Sri Ramakrishna is saying that yes, it is possible, but at the same time he is making us aware of the fact that it is very difficult. The possible doesn't mean easy, and impossibility doesn't mean that the difficulty doesn't mean impossibility. It is difficult, but it is possible. And so that you have to be prepared for that, for this adventure, for this spiritual journey, which at last can, of course, lead you to the goal, which at last can help you to succeed in your spiritual journey. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is encouraging the devotees. So that's why the devotees listen to these words in deep silence. So the master's conversation continues. So we will continue with this next section of this conversation again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.